So worry and stress have a lot of overlap, right? And we often use them interchangeably. I'm going to spend a little time to differentiate these things a little bit, but they do overlap quite a bit. And then anxiety also overlaps with worry and stress. They're all a little bit different, and they're very interrelated. They share in a lot of different kinds of ways. The reason this is important is because our consciousness and our ability to become self-conscious is potentially the greatest tool that we have for improving our lives. And it also, if we don't know how to use it, can be something that can make our life miserable. So I like this Ashley brilliant quote, due to circumstances beyond my control, I am master of my fate and captain of my soul. So you're it. If you want to do something about your anxiety, your stress, the way that you think, the way that you create your life, you are the captain whether you like it or not. So we might as well learn how to use these capacities because there's really no going back. I think sometimes unconsciously we try to go back with other ways of managing anxiety and stress, like drinking too much or taking drugs or medications or eating too much, all the millions of ways we have of going unconscious.
So how are worry, stress, and anxiety different?
So worry is a type of, this is how I think about it, and I can be argued with. I'm not sure that any of this is absolutely true. I'm kind of throwing it out there. I'm writing a book on it, so if I'm wrong, please tell me before the book is written. But it seems to me that worry is a type of thinking, okay? And our friend here, Ziggy, says, the figments of my imagination are out to get me. That's kind of the most common use of the imagination, is just letting your imagination kind of go to the worst scene scenarios, getting kind of entranced or hypnotized by your worries, and letting your imagination scare you. Because I think, in a sense, the most common unconscious use of the imagination is to drive ourselves crazy or worry ourselves sick. So the bar is set pretty low. That's the good news. We can learn to use it more on purpose and do better than that. So worry is a type of thinking. It's a repetitive kind of thinking, sometimes a rumination. It's generally troubled. It often has to do with things that are either in the past or in the future. Okay, it's the opposite of be here now. Okay, it's the opposite of present centered. That doesn't mean it's bad, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a function, but we're in our brain, we're thinking about something, we're going over and over and over it. And again, I think that's because the adaptive function of worry, I always assume that something is an attempt by nature or by life to solve a problem or to give us an advantage. So if you think about what could the advantage be of being able to go over a problem over and over and over in my mind? Well, I think it's kind of like if you have a big tangled ball of yarn or thread, and you're trying to untangle it, and you find a place that's loose, and you pull it for a while, and you get some looseness, and then you get stuck again, so you turn the ball over, and you find another loose place, and you free up some more stuff, and you turn it over again, and you free up some more stuff. And if you keep doing that, turning it over and over, looking at it from different angles, finding the loose places, finding where things are knotted together, excuse me, if you persevere with it, more often than not, you're going to get that whole thing untangled. And then go on to the next tangled mess that you find, okay? But you are likely to get that one untangled. And I think that's the function of worry. It makes our concerns transportable, so you can think about it at any time. And that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. And I think that depends on whether you're using your brain or you're being run by it. Your brain is an incredible organ. Your mind has something to do with it. And at least in certain circumstances, your mind can learn to use your brain in better ways. That's what this is about. So it's very easy, though, for this adaptive function of problem solving and turning things over and over to become a habit, or to become repetitive, to become ruminative, and just kind of become its own thing. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is that worry can serve kind of a magical function. There's a magical unconscious function of worry, a couple of them actually. So one is that most things that you worry about never happen. Most things that you worry about never happen. And if you know, that's an old rubric that we've all heard, and I found myself wondering, well, is that really true? So I've been teaching this as a 6-week class, this Worrying Well class. I've taught it a few times now, and I've asked people at the beginning of the class to list all the things that they find themselves repetitively worrying about. And then sometime later on, we've just checked in with the first class, which was about 9 months ago, to see how many of those things have happened. And not very many of them have happened. So I don't know if anybody's ever studied that really before, but you could do it yourself by writing them down and then check in about 6 months or a year. Now, the interesting thing about that, the way that the brain works is, at some unconscious level of the brain, the brain could conclude that the thing didn't happen because you worried about it. Right? That's a function of, and there's an old story about a woman who walks around her house. She's an old woman, she's walking around her house every day, mumbling, walking around her house, walking around her house. She walks around her house all day long until she's carved a rut around her house, and it goes up to about the middle of her thighs. And finally, one of their neighbors can't take it anymore, and he goes over and he says, you know, I hope you don't mind if I ask you why you walk around your house every day. And she says, well, I'm keeping it safe from tigers. And he says, well, you know, we're in Indiana, there aren't any tigers here. And she says, see? Okay. So it's possible that we get rewarded for worrying because so many of those things don't happen. And at some magical, unconscious, primitive level of thought, those two things could possibly be connected. The other thing that has been researched is that sometimes worrying about things distracts us from things that are actually bothering us. So that worrying about little things and do lists and so on and so forth, and always fussing and always worrying and always having something to fuss up about and to worry about, actually distracts us from something that might be deeper and more emotional and actually be harder for us to take. So, and we know that that's a function that's actually been studied, so that worry prevents deeper, richer, more emotion-laden thinking, which typically comes in images and comes in the quiet times, you know. So if there's a lot of feeling there that's hard to process or hard to feel or that's unprocessed and that we've never dealt with, it's, in a sense, useful to keep the mind very busy. Because if you get quiet, your emotions will come up. And ultimately, we think that that's a good thing. Emotions are natural, they're healthy, they have a wisdom to them that most of us have not also been educated in. But they can be hard to feel, you know. Very few people have very much trouble feeling joy. Although a lot of times we're blocked from feeling joy because we are unable or unwilling to feel other emotions. When you start feeling one emotion, you know, the others go, hey, the door's open. And they might want to kind of come up and be felt. So there are functions of worry, and again, some of them unconscious, magical, maybe not in our best interest over time. Others, adaptive, problem solving, go over the problem. So it behooves us to kind of learn what we're doing with the worry, and that gives us choices in terms of what we're doing with the rest. Okay? So worry is a thinking function, whereas anxiety is an uncomfortable feeling. It's usually in the chest or the upper abdomen, not always, but it's most often up in this area or this area. It's an uncomfortable feeling of fear or apprehension or dread. Dread is it's that feeling, oh my God, something bad is going to happen. I know it. Something bad is going to happen. You don't know, you may be attached to something, or it may be free-floating and not attached to anything. And anxiety often comes with physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat, pain in the chest, sweating, shortness of breath. There's often a feeling with anxiety, if anxiety is very strong, like panic attacks, there's often a very characteristic feeling that comes with panic attacks, and the feeling is impending doom. People with panic attacks, they feel they're about to die. And it's often, again, since the symptoms are often in the chest or in the abdomen, we see these things in medicine all the time. And you could really make a case for, one of maybe the primary function of a primary care doctor is seeing if there's anything else but anxiety going on. Because anxiety can cause so many symptoms in so many systems of the body and make us afraid. Sense that something bad's going to happen. Anxiety is a function of a part of the brain that is the emotional part of the brain. It's called the limbic system or the emotional brain. So worry belongs to the thinking part of the brain, and there's a lot of interaction, but worry belongs in the thinking part of the brain, the cortex. Anxiety typically comes from the limbic or emotional part of the brain, and I'll show you what that looks like. And stress, which is the third leg of our uncomfortable stool here, is actually a physical response to a threat, real or imagined. And in modern life, most of the threats are either perceived or imagined, but they're not, so somebody's probably told you the story of the saber-toothed tiger and the fight or flight response and so on. That this is a response we think was designed by nature. So when you walked out of the cave and you ran into a big predator, like a saber-toothed tiger, your part of your nervous system fires off and you get a big shot of adrenaline and your heart beats faster and your blood clots faster and your blood pressure goes up and your muscles get supercharged and you're ready to run or run the fastest 2 miles you've ever run in your life or fight the tiger to death, and then it supercharges you. It's that kind of thing we hear about when the mother moves a car to save the baby. The thing is that this response can go off in response to threats that are not predators, it can go off in response to stock market movements, economic changes, thinking about aging, thinking about whether you can meet your responsibilities, all kinds of stuff, and all kinds of stuff that unless you know where the off button is on your television or your radio or your computer, that you can just literally pump into your brain, 24/7 if you stay up. All the bad news of every bad thing that has happened around the world to anybody, or if it's a slow news day, what could happen. Okay, like the H1N1 flu, because it's doesn't look like a terribly dangerous flu right now, but it could become really dangerous. And that's what's got everybody scared and everybody freaked out and standing in line. What could happen? So, and yes, there's a balance between, again, being able to predict the future and take measures to prevent things happening that don't need to happen, and freaking out for months about something that probably will never happen. It's a yin-yang kind of relationship. So the important thing here is that stress is a physical response. It's not stuff that happens to you. It's a physical response that your body has to survive a short-term stress. And if you survive that short-term stress, like the saber-toothed tiger, you've either killed it or you've run away from it and run as fast as you can, climb the highest tree that you can. You burned up all these stress chemicals. And when the tiger goes away, you kind of limp back to the cave and breathe a big sigh of relief and tell everybody about how you killed the tiger or ran away from the tiger. And your body rested and compensated and recharged itself and replaced all the chemicals that it used during that intense 20 to 30 minute fight. Or else the tiger has eaten you and you don't have any more stress, But one way or another, it's all over in about 20 or 30 minutes. Okay? So there's none of this like years, of stress that go on if you're a good worrier, where you wake up in the morning and the first thing on your mind is, oh my God, what's going to happen with this? Am I going to be able to do this? And am I going to be able to meet that? And so on and so forth. And of course, the really good worriers are not only doing it during the daytime, you're up at night too, because you can't sleep. Right? And so it's taking your, and that takes your resilience away, and it becomes a real, negative, vicious cycle. So, to review, worry is a type of repetitive circular thinking. Anxiety is an uncomfortable feeling of fear or dread. Stress is a physical response that prepares you to meet challenges.